here are a couple of my like more psychodynamic boundary exercises, or not exercises, maybe practices. The first one is do not process with people you do not trust. That's the first one. Like
Oof.
if
Do
you're
not process with people you do not trust.
point final. Yep.
Boom.
Yeah.
Hey, friends, we're back for part two of my conversation with Jessica. Today, we're going to dive into financial health in the coming year, also spiritual boundaries and personal boundaries, and what that looks like. I hope you enjoy.
This period that we're in of 2024 is one in which I am hoping people think about media literacy and they prioritize their own media literacy so that we can know, the source that we're getting news from. We can kind of have a way of assessing, is this a reliable source or is this not? Can I verify it? Like having that critical thinking skill is really hard. And most people just don't have it because it's so much effort. Again, we're talking about
Well, who has the time to
slowing
go
down.
verify? It's like, it's what we talk about here in terms of health. Like, now we have to be our own doctors too. Well, now we have to be our own journalists. Like, we have to
Yes.
go verify our own information. How do you verify information when they're talking to the White House? They're not answering our calls. I mean, obviously, I'm a journalist, so it's separate, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
it's almost, it's too much to bear. People, like you said, they don't even have the motivation to work because they can't even pay their bills. How are they going to go be their own journalists now?
And this is exactly how it goes. I mean, this is in all, okay, so I'm not a historian. I'm an astrologer, but astrology looks at history. It's basically like a different tool with which to look back at history. But I will say this, one of the most common things that fascistic or strongman leadership, what they will do to the populace is to overwhelm with chaos and drama and distractions and then point to scapegoats, right? And I think this is part of what we're living through. So
Mm-hmm.
back to my like, is this civil war? Is this not civil war? Is this a world war? Is this not a world war? We look at, these terms like civil war and world war, and we think, oh, this thing that happened in yesteryear, and there was a date, and everyone was like, oh, it's a war. Like, that's not how it works. Historians look back and they're like, this is when it started and that's when it ended. But that's not how people experience it, right? And I think this like constant barrage of like, you can't trust anything, you can't trust anyone,
Yeah.
that leads to burnout, demoralization. If there
Mm-hmm.
is no truth, then there's no point in voting, then there's no point in fighting,
So
then there's
that's the
no point.
thing. But
That's the
I'll
thing.
tell you, Jessica, when COVID hit, I had this really overwhelming feeling that there was no more truth. And I
Hmm.
kept feeling it, and I'm very intuitive. And I said it, and there were people who were really like, "You're a journalist. How dare you say there's no truth?" And I'm like, "Oh, maybe I'm an idiot." So I just kind of kept my mouth shut. Now I realize not only is there no more truth, truth doesn't matter anymore. You can see people be slaughtered, and it's like, no, no, it didn't. No, they didn't. No, that didn't happen. And you're like, wait, what? What are we talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can see something with your own eyes, and then there'll be people who seeing the same thing say, no, that's not what happened.
That's, or, that's not a problem unless it's happening to me. Right. I mean, this is actually, I'm glad you brought up COVID because I think that COVID was a really important tool that was used against the populace to spread misinformation and chaos and fear. And what became the scapegoat? Doctors, like scientists, that
Hmm.
became the scapegoat, but somehow it did. And COVID isn't over. I believe the last I read, it was the third leading cause of death in the United States. The third leading, giving, you know, uh, all the ways that humans die and get sick or get into accidents. COVID is number three. I mean, it's still very much active. And I think it will continue through 2024. And, honestly, I don't see it changing until policy changes or, which is my big hope, and I don't really think it'll ever happen, or enough individuals prioritize community care, and do the simple things we know that stop the spread. And this is where it comes back to like, which truth is the most important truth? I mean, COVID's still happening, but most people are like, yeah, but it's not that big a deal. I get sick, I move on. For people who can afford to get sick and move on. That's true. But then there's so many immune compromised people in the world, people who've had cancer, people who have a myriad of other health issues. Plus, we don't really know what COVID does to the body over time because it's only existed for a few years. And this is where, when we become so overwhelmed by there is no truth, which you're not alone. I think, I mean, my instinct when you said that was like, oh, you're picking up on what's happening in the collective, right? It was just like I think thousands or millions of people were like, who do we trust? There's no one
Yeah.
to trust. What do we do? There's nothing to do. And that leads to a lack of civic engagement, a lack of empathy for the other, and that kind of like demoralization that makes it hard to go on. Like, why would I plan my future? Why would I work really
Oh
hard
my God, there's
if
so
there's
many
no
moments
point?
where I even have those thoughts too, where I'm like, do we
Oh,
really want to bring another kid into this crazy place? And what's going to happen? Like it is very scary when you put your attention there. That's why I love Tony Robbins. Where you put your attention is where you put your energy, or, focus equals feeling. So I tried to stay away from the news and all of that.
mm,
And then I heard that this was Russia's whole plan for us for years. I don't remember where
yeah,
I heard or read that, but
yeah,
they had planned to demoralize us little by little, and that
yeah. It's
it's
a war
going
of
great.
propaganda.
Yeah. I mean, and again, who knows what's true, but it sounds like they did what they said they did. I don't
I
know.
think there's a lot of evidence that they've done that, and they did it a lot through Meta, through Instagram and Facebook. And again, there's evidence there because there's paper trails and all of that. And I think, again, this is where we talk about technology and we talk about the first thing I mentioned to you, which is we need heart. Because I am dedicated my whole life to spirituality, and I consume a lot of news. And the reason why is because I think if the empaths and the humanitarians and the people who truly care about each other are informed about what's happening, we can do something about it. Because I believe if I'm an empath, if I'm, a psychic, if I'm capable of having, if I'm a religious person, any kind of deeply spiritual person, the reason why we are sensitive is so that we can be an asset for the world. And so I am forever telling other spiritual people, like, yeah, bring your vibration down to earth, and then go recover and figure out the strategy. Because otherwise, we end up thoughts and prayersing our life away. And you know
Mm.
what I mean with thoughts and
No,
prayers.
I
Like, you
love
see,
what you're saying. You're inspiring me.
yay, okay, good. I'm so happy to hear it. Because this is the problem with thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers is no action in reality. And the only thing that we can do is take our thoughts and prayers and use them to bolster reality, our shared reality. Oh my goodness, what just happened?
I don't know, but that there's some earlier where you got like a hand up or something, a thumbs up, and I was like, wait, what's going on?
What is happening?
Dwayne,
I
what's
have a new
happening? Is that
computer.
on us or is that on her?
That was
I
just
don't know. I don't have any
spiritual
filters or anything.
timing.
It's a
All
new
right,
computer.
wait, but you're the new age person. Is this some kind of superior power coming in talking
Yes.
to us right
Yes.
now?
It was God.
I'm
It
not
was God
joking. By the
making.
way, I'm not joking.
That was like so cool. If you're watching this on YouTube, all of a sudden as she said this amazing thing, the fireworks like burst from her like body.
It's wild. And I haven't been really looking at myself, but I was like, what is that? Well, I guess it was ordained. Okay. We'll just say
Yeah.
that. But, and again, okay, so there's something else happening astrologically. It's the planet Saturn and the planet Neptune are both in the zodiac sign of Pisces. And it's been in 2023 and also 2024. These are the 2 years where we're going to have both these things happening. And one of the things it teaches us is how to have healthy boundaries with our spirituality. And this is coinciding with a time of a rise in cults and a rise in propaganda and like there is no truth and all this kind of stuff. And I really, again, think that having spiritual and energetic boundaries is essential. And it's always been essential for humans, always. But now that we're connected to each other through technology and the ways in which we are, we need it. I'm a psychic. And so I'll tell you, when I get somebody or a bunch of people giving me a lot of energy from a social media platform, it feels different than if it's from my podcast, which feels different than if it's in person. The subtleties are different, but it's the same thing. We need better boundaries because we're more connected to more people than ever in human history. And especially if you have any kind of a platform. I mean, what are the chances? Let's say if 10,000 people follow you. What are the chances in any other time in human history that you would have 10,000 people who know your name and know what you wore yesterday? Like what? Like that's bananas. 1,000 people. Like
Yeah.
1,000 people is a lot of humans.
Great point.
And we're all like smooching each other with energy, we really are. And so I think it's more important than ever to know what's happening and to figure out a way to consume news that works for you, that you can sustain. Because if we don't stay informed, then we cannot do what needs to be done. Because what needs to be done, I think, is we need to build communities where we're protecting each other. And I think like what we're seeing with like the SAG-AFTRA, am I saying that right? I read it all the time, but I don't say it.
Yeah.
That is a community of people, some who have a massive amount of power, and then most who have very little power, where you're coming together as a union and you're advocating for each other. I mean, that to me is really powerful. And in this past year, we've seen a lot of unions come together to speak truth to power, to protect each other. And that, I think we need that more in all facets of life. But again, we can't do that if the most empathetic amongst us aren't even aware of what's happening, right?
Yeah, well, because a lot of us have turned off because for self-preservation.
Yes. Yeah. And I say, find new ways. Okay, turn off, get your energy back, but then find new ways. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are people out there who have books about it, who give TED Talks about it. It's out there, and maybe not enough in the woo new age space. I think in the new age space, most prominent thought leaders are like, don't do things that mess up your vibes.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad. And I'm not ever going to say that to anyone. I'm like, yeah, feel bad. When you see people being carpet bombed, when you see a genocide live on your phone, feel bad. That's actually really healthy. When you see people dying from, a disease, or when you see whole communities losing their homes because of a climate event, right? Feel bad.
Yeah.
And then find ways of taking care of yourself away from being overstimulated, and then come back with a way. And we all have there's a bazillion ways, nobody's going to fix any of the problems. Like, I'm not going to fix the problem. You're not going to fix the problem. But we can be like, I think of it as like, the wave in sports. Obviously I don't do sports stuff, but like in sports
the wave is fun.
Arenas where people do the wave. That's, in my view, how activism or microactivism or being a humanist or a spiritual person should perform. Like, sometimes you need to sit down. Sometimes you sit down, you don't do anything, and that's okay because somebody else is standing up. If there is a wave of human empathy and a wave of activation and engagement from people who have heart, then the world changes. And it doesn't change because any one of us took a stand. It changes because sometimes we sit and sometimes we stand. And we do it in what can be a collective movement that brings more heart to the world. But again, I keep on returning to this, and I'm probably going to say it too many times in 2024, but we need to expand our hearts to be able to tolerate grief and sadness and anger. And we need to be able to tolerate paradox and nuance, because the truth is complicated and confusing. And we may be feeling very conflicting emotions. And what most of us do most of the time when we feel that way is we shut down, we turn away, or we project it out. I mean, if you've seen the comment section of anything ever, then we project it out. And I think that for those of us who can, the most important work is to just expand the heart so we can tolerate all these things and then respond with intention to the best parts of ourselves, to the wisest parts of ourselves, taking care of the most vulnerable parts of ourselves, But again, I think we need each other now more than ever. I do. So,
I agree. I was going to say, about tolerate. I think the other thing is tolerate other people and empathize with their beliefs and opinions. And that's what's not happening. Everyone is, I'm right, you're wrong.
And not only that, if you're not on my side, you die.
Right. You're my enemy. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no two sides. Like, there's no. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Kev.
Do you feel I've no that's and that's where I see is the biggest problem is no one's taking the time to empathize with the other side. Okay, why would they this upset them so much? Why would they be okay? And then with that, it's where can we meet the common ground rather than I'm gonna
Yes.
crush you. I'm gonna my way's the right way. I'll die to be right. All this such extremism, and I will tell you, I don't know I have some psychic intuition about career paths. That's kind of my thing. But I will say I feel like in 28 things get a little calmer when kind of this old extreme guards on both sides pass away. Do you see that at the very
Mm.
least for hope that in 28 we start getting more independent leadership that's nonpartisan?
That's really interesting that you say that. So 2025, 26, things are very explosive. And I would say it's like a kind of I don't know a single astrologer who's looking forward to that time. Let me put it that way.
25,
So
26.
25, 26.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. It looks really the potential for violence and for a lot of destructive behaviors from corporations, nations, is strong. And so if in fact 2028 is a time, as you're mentioning, right? Like that is where there's like a rebuilding. Astrology supports that idea, but I wouldn't predict it in this moment because of how unpredictable matters will be leading up. Does that make sense? Like this is the problem with humans. And it's also the
Yes.
gift of humans, fucking free will, right? Pardon, sorry, keep on cussing, but free will, it is free will. That's the problem. It's our greatest strength and our greatest weakness because as you're both pointing out, we are using our free will to say, how could you disagree with me? If you disagree with me, you're against me. There's something wrong with you. Here's the move, instead of being able to say, wow, if you're engaging in a good faith argument with me, which I think is key, because a lot of people are not engaging in good faith arguments, they're just arguing. And we don't bother with those people. And sometimes we are those people and we need to learn to sit down. But being able to say, I do not understand where you're coming from. Can you actually explain it to me? And don't respond. Just listen. Don't try to agree or disagree. Just understand. This is, again, it requires heart. It requires the capacity to accept that you do not understand someone else. You do not agree with somebody else. And you're willing to work with them on that because honestly, it's the only way that anyone changes. It just is. And the social media and the internet in general, it's like a bunch of hammers, hammer, 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 hammer. But true evolution of society and on this level that we're talking about of like understanding each other and cultivating empathy, these things require feather. They require like a lot more nuance and patience. And my belief is that if we prioritize that in 2024, we lay a better foundation for what's coming in 25 or 26. Because the thing I'm scared of is that specific communities become targeted and scapegoated and further harmed. Which is like a whole other conversation, which we should not have because we have enough stress. But I think that 2028 can be a time where things are kind of like on the move back up.
So, two things. One, I don't know if you are a speaker. Do you ever do speaking engagements?
Yeah, yes and no.
You need to be doing them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very nice.
Really 1,000,000,000% thought Kevin was going to say that when he said that he's good at career intuition. When you were speaking, I literally was like, this woman needs to be on a stage speaking to many of us. Like you are really, really special. Like that was so moving and so inspiring. You need to be doing more of that. That's just an aside for you.
Thank you. I'll take that.
I would love to know what spiritual boundaries look like.
I'm so happy you asked. So I've like taught classes on this and like I talk about it on my Patreon all the time, which is to say it looks like a lot of different things, but like broad stroke. I'm going to give you a woo answer and then more of a psychodynamic answer. Here, let's start woo. You've seen Wizard of Oz, right?
Oh, my favorite movie of all time.
I mean, what's happening?
If you're listening to this on our screens, more fireworks just appeared around her.
How did that happen? I don't understand how it's
It's
happening
got to
though.
be on
Like,
one of our
when you
Zooms.
when you mention Maria's favorite movie of all time. So
like
if you
what?
don't think this is connected, I'm telling you, I shouldn't be the one. I'm the least believer of the three of us, and I'm telling you, something's going
What if
on
I
here.
just say wizard?
What wizard?
Nothing happened.
No,
Oz?
it's very weird.
Zoom has gesture controls that you can do.
Am I doing something with my hands that's like making it happen?
I see it as like a secret menu kind of thing. The only one that I know of is if you hold a thumbs up long enough, it'll give you a thumbs up as like a
Zoom, God,
like
Dwayne bringing in science.
Yeah, Dwayne, you sound like you make a lot of sense, but nothing she's now doing that you're saying. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
But was
Thumbs up.
I putting my thumbs up before? No.
You never did.
I think it's an experimental thing, so who knows what's going on.
This is
It's
hilarious.
very weird.
I love it.
It's very weird. We'll take it. We'll take it. I mean, it's at least it's not like double horns or something.
It's
You know
the
what I mean?
perfect-
It's
you keep
nice.
timing it perfectly. So
So funny. Okay, so spiritual
funny.
boundaries.
Okay, so we're back to your
Woo.
favorite movie. So, okay, here's the thing. From my understanding as a medium and a psychic and all the woo-woo things I am, the soul is not inside of the body. The body is inside of the soul. And if we think about Glenda the Good Witch, okay, that whole movie is just a spiritual metaphor on top of a spiritual metaphor, hugging a spiritual metaphor, just first of all. But if we think of Glenda the Good Witch and her beautiful bubble, think of your aura, the aura which is within which the soul resides, which is much larger than your body, as that Glenda the Good Witch bubble. Now, in fact, our auras are not as small as her bubble. They're massive. They're big, right? But whatever you can visualize, whatever, the human imagination has its limits. And so however you want to visualize it is fine. If you visualize a Glenda the Good Witch bubble around you and you set the intention that that is your energy field and it is bigger than your body, it is your energy, and you set the intention that no one or thing is allowed in past the bubble. So not just not into your body, but not into your energy sphere. This is something that can be on a very woo level, very protective. So what I will often do is I'll go and I'll put, I'll visualize around my Glenda the Good Witch bubble, those mirrors, that you have like often in cars where you can't see in, but you can see out of them. So,
I think you've given us this advice before because I used to do the mirrored bubble all the time and I forgot, and probably really important to do it again. I really loved it. I would just allow light to come in from the top.
I think I may have given you this when we did our reading.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really cool about it is that it lets narcissists see themselves. People who just want to fight, like, devil's advocates are just like, I just want to fight with you because, it lets them see themselves when they look at you, and that kind of satiates them, So it's a really good resource, and it also can help you to ground your energy if you need grounding, or so you can fill up your Glenda the Good Witch bubble with the energy of Earth. Or it can help to ignite passion and energy. You can light it up with gold or reds or oranges, if you need to be activated and more engaged, if you're like depressed and you're dragging, and on it goes. You can play with different colors and different vibes. And so it's a really simple, accessible energy exercise. And I think it's so accessible because Glenda the Good Witch is just such an easy visual for most people, even, I think across age demographics. So that's the woo. Now, here are a couple of my like more psychodynamic boundary exercises, or not exercises, maybe practices. The first one is do not process with people you do not trust. That's the first one. Like if you're
not process with people you do not trust.
Point final. Yep.
Boom.
Yeah. And within that, it means that having conversations, let's say online, with people you don't know, they maybe know you, but you don't know them, right? It gets complicated. But having conversations with people that you don't really know become a choice. And I think an important part of that choice is if they approach you in a good faith way, Have a good faith conversation. But anyone who doesn't approach you in a good faith way doesn't deserve your energy, doesn't get your energy. And that's simply a boundary. And all boundaries have consequence. And sometimes we don't like the consequence of our boundaries because people get really offended by boundaries. I remember this was a number of years ago, but I used to be very active on Instagram. I'm not really that much on it at this moment, but hopefully I'll change that. Anyways, I used to be really active on Instagram, and people would all the time ask me to like explain this thing about my chart, which is basically asking for a reading, right? And most people don't realize that they're asking for a free reading in the comment section of a post, but that's what they're doing. And so I would gently but firmly say, I don't give readings, and that's what this is asking for. I'd be very firm. And I was being interviewed by somebody once, and she was like, "You're so harsh on your Instagram." And I was like, oh, this is a person who sees me communicating clearly what my boundary is as like punishing or negative. And that tells me a lot about where this person's at with their experience of boundaries and communication of boundaries. And it doesn't tell me a lot about me. So this is where I get to with this other piece, which is being able to own what your boundary is, what you can, what you can't, and to give others the freedom to think or feel whatever they think or feel. That's how you have a healthy boundary. Because what most of us do is we're like, this is my boundary. Are you okay with it? And then you've lost the boundary.
Yeah.
And the truth is that people are allowed to feel however they feel. And it's a practice to let other people feel complicated about you or annoyed by you or whatever it is, to let people feel what they feel and to take responsibility for how you feel and how you conduct yourself. That's the move. But we lose energy by trying to manage how other people feel about our boundaries. Does that make sense?
Oh, 1,000,000%. As somebody who's just learned boundaries in the last 2 years, let's say. Yeah.
Boundaries are so hard. I talk about boundaries a lot. And I am obsessed with boundaries because as much as I have been working on boundaries for as many years as I have, it's a practice. It's no one has it perfect. That's just not a thing.
Yeah, because we want to be liked, we want to be loved, and we want to fit. And when you express boundaries, you don't fit anymore.
Correct.
It's really hard. But I know my life's gotten better as I've laid my boundaries, at least in the workplace, where I'm like, no, this doesn't work for me. This is not how I work. This is how I work. Usually what I do is like, this is how I work best. And then they have to abide by that boundary, and then everyone's happy. I'm happy because I'm happy, and then they feel happy because I'm happy, and then it's great.
I mean, I think, okay, so some people will hear this as a negative thing, but I think about humans a lot like dogs, right? I'm an animal communicator. I don't think animals are lower than us. But the thing about dogs that are so hard for me is you put a dog in a crate, and apparently the dog is actually more calm because it knows the boundary of what they're supposed to be protecting. Humans are a lot like that. If you just feed your dog off the table 24 hours a day, if your dog has free reign of all the rooms all the time, there can be anxiety because it's well, everything's mine. Everything's my responsibility. What can I do? How am I going to get the next thing? Humans are exactly the same. If I don't know what your boundaries are, ultimately, I'm either going to be in a fake relationship with you where I'm just making assumptions that are either making you feel terrible or good or whatever. Also, I don't know how to show up for you. Do you know what I mean? It's really, I think so many of us are trained to feel like having boundaries, expressing boundaries is mean or rude or controlling. But the truth is, it's how we love each other. It's how we let other people love us in a real way. And, you were talking about news before, and it's I wouldn't encourage you to just start reading the news at 8 a.m. and never stop. That's not healthy any more than not looking at the news at all would be. It's about having a healthy boundary based on self-awareness, right? So sorry. Based on self-awareness, based on what you know of yourself in this moment. And that's the thing about boundaries versus rules. Rules are rigid, they're unbending, and boundaries are adaptable and flexible. And I think when we talk about adaptability and flexibility, I mean, most of us aren't, when it comes to self-care, because a lot of us are motivated towards self-care out of fear. So there's so many layers to why boundaries are so hard for so many of us. I think especially, people who are nurtured as female, we're just told to not have boundaries. We're told to just let people kiss us or tell us how we look or what we're supposed to be feeling. We're like often reared to take care of men, right? I mean, it's not a heavily boundaried thing. But it's really important spiritual work. I think it's really important psychological work, emotional work, and behavioral work. And uh, I, I think, the astrology of this moment, just to bring it back, is teaching us boundaries by showing us the consequences of not having them in our personal lives, around self-care, with technology, and in the world at large, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, honestly, because having healthy boundaries doesn't mean that you're healthy. It doesn't mean that things are going well. It's just it means that you're kind of like leveraging your agency to be as kind of constructive in your own life and in the world around you as you can be. That's really what boundaries are.
And spiritual boundaries are the same or different?
Good question. Okay. Spiritual boundaries, I would say, ultimately are foundational to psychological and emotional and behavioral boundaries, because on a spiritual level, you have to have a sense of your own self, where you begin and where you end. And in order to have boundaries, you must fundamentally not abandon yourself, right? And what happens when you feel bad because you said something, you didn't say something to a friend, and then you feel shame because you feel bad, and then you're like, oh God, I hate shame. And then you turn away and you grab your phone and you scroll.
Is that abandoning yourself?
I would say so. Yeah. I would say so. And I think we all abandon ourselves in ways that are small and large a lot of the time. And we do it because we don't have the tolerance for our own complex emotions. And the next time, you or me or anyone feels any kind of bad, and there's so many kinds of bad to feel. I think that the practice on a spiritual level is to be able to stay present, to notice it in your body, to breathe, and to stay present. 7 seconds, if that's all you can tolerate. 20 seconds, if that's all that you can tolerate. If you can tolerate minutes, you're a champion. But it's about tolerating the emotion before grabbing the phone, before analyzing and coming up with the problem, or criticizing the friend, or criticizing yourself, or whatever it is. Just tolerating the emotions, because that is a spiritual muscle that helps you stay present with you. And when you stay present with you, you have more options. You can perceive more options. When we're in a state of self-defense or self-abandonment, big or small, we can only see two options. And this is my rule of thumb. In an interpersonal situation, and you're like making life plans, if all you can see are two options, you're probably not being totally present. Oh my God.
Balloons. I think we need to disable whatever this is on our accounts for the future. But it was fun.
It's probably my fault, because I have a brand new computer, and I mean it's the same Zoom, but I think I updated it.
I'm dying.
I'm so sorry.
It's so cute.
Balloons. There's a lot of balloons. But that is kind of all or nothing thinking, right? These two options thinking. And so when we are more present and we have better boundaries with ourselves, we can see the nuance, and we can see a myriad of options. And that is so powerful, because it's not just pay attention to the news, ignore the news, tell people what you need, or don't give them any idea about what you need. There's so many like places in between those extremes that we're talking about. And again, we need adaptability and flexibility within our own selves in order to access those ideas. If you think about, I'm going to be such a stereotypical Capricorn for a moment, okay? If you think about climbing a mountain, right? And not just going up the mountain, but like going around the mountain, kind of like a goat may do, right? When you are about to turn a corner, you cannot see what is on the other side. And then as you are turning that corner, when you take a glance at the view looks really different. And then when you're actually all the way around the corner, yeah, you see something completely different, even though you're 5 feet ahead or something like that. What I'm trying to say is subtle shifts in our ability to be present with the full picture of what we're experiencing shift our perspective. And a shift in perspective means you see more options. You see a lot more options. And to me, this is spiritually expansive, and it has a really meaningful kind of cascading effect around your psychology, your emotional body, your physical health, and the choices you make in the material world. So I wouldn't say it's the exact same on the woo level, but it's interconnected, right? It's like the base color of a tapestry. I'm throwing a lot of metaphors in the mix, but hopefully that makes sense.
I love it.
Yeah.
I want to know, and I know everybody wants to know probably about kind of like our financial health in the coming year, because inflation has been so bad. And I was watching an Instagram this morning. I think it was about BlackRock investing in tokens and how if we don't know that this is happening, we need to know. And I'm like, what is tokens? What does this all mean?
Totally. Okay, before I say what I'm going to say, I should say there are financial astrologers out there. I am not one of them, for a lot of reasons, but I'm not a financial astrologer. That said, that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in April that I mentioned, and in general, Pluto in Aquarius, do suggest a major shift in not just in the economy, but the global economy. And not just in the global economy, but the potential of currencies. And so I think we may see really meaningful changes to currencies. So that could be in the direction of cryptocurrencies, or like, I don't know if that's what tokens are. Because again, you and me both, we're not experts.
I'm like, are tokens Bitcoin?
Also,
I don't even know. Dwayne, are tokens Bitcoin? Do you know what they are?
Sure. Yeah.
Dwayne, don't guess and say yes. Say I don't know. That's okay.
It's a bit more complicated, but it generally, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's like if in broad terms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And which is like all I'm going to get, because this is way over my head. But another way that this could play out is that, so much of global currencies are related to the US dollar. And I don't understand this completely. So anyone who is more informed than me will be like, she's kind of, it's kind of like what we just said with the crypto and the tokens. But the US dollar has been an important kind of benchmark for global currencies. And that might change. And as that changes, it will change the kind of whole global economy, which, depending on where you are in the world, could be pretty scary or could be pretty cool. I don't imagine it would be great news for the US. We'll see how it goes. But what we're expecting kind of early in the year, by, April, May, is to see meaningful changes within the economy. And I don't know what that means. They look unpredictable. And again, over the course of the next, 20 years.
So you don't know good or bad when you say that.
Correct. I don't know good or bad. And also, good for who, bad for who, right?
Good point.
I mean, people at the very top, everything's good for them. Nothing's bad, you know? And then there's people at the very bottom, kind of everything ends up being the exact same or worse. When the economy booms, that doesn't make the poorest Americans any happier usually,
Great point.
So it gets very complicated when we talk about the economy. And again, this is part of why I don't do financial astrology, because it gets sticky in my view very quickly. But in any case, the one thing I can see clearly is, it's going to be unpredictable and it's going to change. So within that, I mean, I wouldn't put a huge amount. I mean, I don't know. The stock market seems volatile to me. And I personally am paying a lot of attention because the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction is in Taurus. And Taurus is an earth sign, a fixed earth sign. It's related to real estate. And so we are already seeing places like State Farm have stopped insuring, I think it's new development properties in California and in other places that are high risk in regards to the climate crisis. Have you heard about this as well?
I thought you were going somewhere else. So no, I have not heard this.
So again, not an expert. I may have some of this wrong, or I might be saying it wrong. This is again not my expertise, but yeah, that's a real change that's happening. That certain places are not going to be insurable.
I heard
and they're
for
not going to
flood
get insured.
zones, like for flood zones. Yeah, because
Flood
I
zones,
did
fire
hear that. Yeah.
zones. I mean, there are a lot of places in this country that are incredibly vulnerable to climate crisis, and incredibly vulnerable. And I don't know that they will be insured, And if a property is not insured, you can't get a loan on it. It means you can't sell it. You can't buy it
So
unless
now
you have
people are
a ton
stuck.
of wealth.
Yeah. So one of the things with financial health that I was wondering about is again the loss of freedom, because if we go to digital currency, and I don't know if astrology tells us any of this, if we went to digital currency, the amount of control government would have over us would seemingly be very scary.
Yeah.
So is there anything that we should know?
I will say I read a lot of sci-fi. I have read a lot of sci-fi in my life. And so before, Bitcoin, I was reading sci-fi stories about digital currencies that are like linked to your iris and linked to your fingerprints. And we already have that, right? There's no good way for that to go. And that's not an astrology take. That's just a sci-fi nerd take. And also a common sense take.
Yeah.
But there are astrologers that would be better to talk to about that than me. I don't like to speculate about it because I'm not informed enough. Like you know what I mean? Like you have to really, yeah, I'm not informed enough to really speculate about it. But I do think that we will have a revolution in the coming years, one way or another. And some people hear revolution and they clap. And it's like, well, revolution doesn't assure anything except for calamity and change. Is it an improvement? Is it a change that pleases this group or that group? TBD, But some of this will meaningfully have to do with currency and with the economy and how we do or don't have social services for people. And keeping in mind, as we talk about the economy, it's hard to stop talking about COVID because now we have a huge population of people who are immune compromised. And what this means is people are, getting heart disease and diabetes and all kinds of other vulnerabilities physically but we don't have healthcare here, right? We don't know how to deal with it. So there's like that meaningfully impacts the economy in the US. I mean, I think it doesn't in most Western countries because they have health, they have socialized healthcare. But here in the US, I think it's a meaningful part of the economy. And it's a meaningful part of, and in addition, I should say, everything we've been talking about with technology is connected to some sort of a digital footprint with what you spend, which I would say the fact that we all live off of credit cards already does that. Everything is tracked. Everything is tracked. I go to a store that I don't usually go to. My credit card company texts me and it's like, hey, girl, is that you? I mean, because it knows my behavior. And I think that we should all be a lot more concerned than we are because there's too much happening at once. But that is by design. That is by design. So again, the expansion of heart, I'm going to repeat it too many times because that empowers us to be able to hold many things at once and to allow many of the things we're holding to be ambiguous, uncertain, and unknowable without collapsing around that.
Yeah. Tony Robbins says your quality of life is directly dependent on the amount of uncertainty you can handle.
It's beautiful.
And it's true. So then, is there anything in our upcoming that talks about kind of like mass movements out of our country?
That's a really interesting question. You mean like people leaving? Is that what you mean? It's really interesting. So I hadn't looked at that specifically, but Pluto in Aquarius, this 20-year cycle we're moving into, can and will shake up borders. So we are already seeing that, less in the US, but kind of abroad. I think this kind of domestic conversation around states' rights, it smacks of some real messy, like bordery stuff. But and that might not have been clear. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about something specific that Mike Pence said the other day. So I should just reference that and like throw it away because it's a larger conversation. But I think that it is very possible that borders will change. And I think it's very possible that they will get weaker or stronger. And here's the thing. It is very hard to, a lot of people can leave the US. A lot of people can leave the US, but there are only specific places where they can go, right? And you have to have money to do it. It's real talks, right? And so I think you don't need to be an astrologer to know that if the election goes red in 2024, 25, then a lot of people who wanted to go blue are going to leave. And, potentially vice versa. I mean, I think that doesn't take astrology for the prediction, but in general, I do think that there's going to be changes to that. But here's the thing I really think. I think that the climate crisis is where we're really going to see immigration issues. People are going to be running from and towards locations on this planet where there's less unpredictability in the climate. And to that end, as bad as things are in North America, in the US and Canada in particular, it is like a relatively stable place at this moment. So I've been trying to clock the climate crisis, but I don't have the capacity to predict weather. Although I do see this being a wet one, with Saturn and Neptune both in Pisces. 2024 does look like we might have like a lot of water issues. But again, that gets outside of my specialties.
I love it. Jess, this was amazing. As always.
I love talking to you.
I love talking to you. This was so fun.
Yes.
And inspiring and invigorating because it can get really dark and gloomy. And I think for me, especially the last few years with everything I've gone through with my mom and me and health and whatever, I just was like, my bucket's only so big. Yes. And I had to retreat from my own self-care, but I'm assuming a lot of people are doing that too because everybody's bucket's overfilled. Yes. And everyone's dealing with a cancer in their family or something horrible. Like it's not just me, I know. And then now that I have a baby, I'm like, okay, I just want to focus on being happy because it's been so rough for so long. I just want it to be happy. So forgive me for not being, out there in some kind of way, making that meaningful change. I don't know. I feel like I get to do it through this show in a lot of ways. But I think your message of expanding our hearts and the fact that we are supposed to feel is really, really important. We are supposed to see babies being slaughtered and feel that.
Yeah.
We're supposed to. And I do. It's not that I've completely cut the news out. I do. I dip in. And then the second I've dipped in and it's gotten so dark, I start watching animal videos to get myself back.
Right.
Which is kind of what you said, actually. Like now heal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I know what's gone on. And then I heal. And so
I think
okay. No, I want to hear what you have to say. And then I have a question. Sorry.
Okay, great. So I would just say like the next time that happens, my advice would be get overwhelmed. Know you're going to look for a animal video, but before you do, put your phone face down for a minute, not even a full minute, not even a full 60 seconds, 20 seconds is fine. 10 seconds is fine. And just stay with the feelings because it builds a muscle. You know how I'm such a schlub. I do not like working out, but I remember I used to work with a personal trainer who's like, when you're building muscle, you're ripping up your muscles. And I was like, evidence I should not build muscle. I was so offended by that. But the truth is, on a spiritual level, you're building muscle when you feel like you're being torn apart by an emotional truth, an emotional reality. It feels bad, but it is really valuable and really important to be able to build that muscle. And it doesn't have to be 100 reps. It just needs to be building your tolerance. So you might start at 5 seconds before you grab the animal video. And then you build eventually to maybe like being able to take 2 minutes. And I don't know that it needs to be any longer than that. Maybe for you it does, maybe it doesn't. But it's about building that muscle of tolerating the reality of how you feel and the reality of the world and accepting that this is not the moment that you can make that you can change the world. Or maybe by sitting with the emotions, some inspiration will come around managing self-care or participating in the world. Who knows? But you can't know if you go straight to the animal video.
Yeah.
That's the kind of like magic recipe, if you will.
I think that's great advice. I will definitely take it. Kev, you have the floor.
I was going to say, how do microtransactions fit into this? Meaning, you see this in you see something happening overseas or in another state that is, a shooting, anything, and it's making you upset. For me, my thing was not so much to go watch animal videos, but it would be to control what I can control, which is to be kind or decent, caring and empathetic to the individuals I'm coming in contact with during the day. And I don't know if that pays off in a greater way or what. I know that's my coping mechanism, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
So I think a lot of things about that. I think, first of all, that's a great strategy, is like seeing cruelty in the world and suffering in the world and letting it inspire you to put more effort into being kind and to being a part of the resiliency of the human spirit. That's great. No correction there whatsoever. And I think that, one of the first questions, Maria, you asked me is like about civil war, right? Are we in a civil war? Are we not in a world war? I don't know. I don't feel confident to say we're not in either of those things. But I do think that the call to doing something is greater now than it's been in a long time. And so then the question becomes like, if you agree with that, which you don't have to, or you might agree with it in March, but not in April or whatever, right? If you agree with that, then what are ways that feel within your personality, within your resources, within your nature to participate? So that might mean using something like ResistBot. You see a shooting, and you know what ResistBot is?
No.
Okay.
No.
ResistBot is this great tool. You just text, I think you text resist to like 50 something something, and it texts you a script and then a link, and you click and you just go, and it's like super easy to communicate with your elected officials. And it basically, you can edit the script, you can just send the script. There's also something called fivecalls.org, and they both have apps, for your smartphone. And they are resources where you can tell your elected officials what you freaking think about them, because we can't forget they are actually elected. They have to listen to us when enough of us speak. So letting them know, like, I'm really pleased that you did this thing, or hey, you better do that thing. That is a way of being engaged, I think, that doesn't take a lot out of us. It doesn't require that we like spend a lot of time or like read 20 articles or whatever, but it's also a way of kind of putting your stamp in the world to be like, yeah, I will be counted, because again, my feeling is those of us who are the most empathetic and the most caring need to be loudest, because right now that's not who's loudest. Right now, Moms for Liberty is loudest, burning books, isolating children, and that's a very small group of people, but they're angry and they're righteous and they're consistent and they're loud. And so many of us, I'm making assumptions about the two of you, but I feel confident about it.
I don't even know about them.
So. Moms for Liberty, they're the like book burning group that has taken the nation by storm. And they're terrible. They're worth learning about. They're terrible. But if those of us who have humanistic values, one way or another, make our voices heard, I think the world changes. And if those of us who have humanistic values just go about our days, that's good. It's good, but also it's not the same as being a part of the wave that I was talking about earlier, and so many people, like political activists will say, like, think globally, act locally. And I think that's really valid and real. And also it really just comes down to like, where are your passions ignited? What feels sustainable for you given your personality? And, like for me, something like fivecalls.org or ResistBot, I use those because they're super easy. they're easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm a lazy baby. So I like easy things. So I use those things. They're not the only things out there, but they're worth learning about, because there are so many ways that technology, those are both technologies, right, have made being a vocal participant of our society easier, so much easier than ever before.
Yeah, I
So
wouldn't know where to
that.
start to talk to our elected officials. So I think that's great to have that, because we need to. Jess, this was so lovely. Thank you so much for spending all this time with us and sharing all of this. And I know that people can go to your podcast and all your different areas for even deeper conversations on this. I know you like to say sometimes like the darker stuff is there.
Yes, it's all there.
We'll put a link in the summary for people to find you, but thank you as always. And thank you for your big heart.
Oh, thank you for your big heart. Thanks so much for having me. This has been a joy.
Of course. And please start speaking engagements.
You know what?
You're meant
it's
to do
funny
it.
that you said that, because I was thinking about it and just talking about it with somebody just like, I think it was a week ago. So I'm taking it as a big sign.
Yeah.
Not just because there were fireworks when you said it, but also.
Well, those are my psychic abilities. I just felt when I feel it, like I have to say it. And I'm like, oh my God, she's got to be on stages. Like, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really sweet.
I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, have a great day. Have a great holiday.
You too. Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
And bye to Kev as well.
We'll find him. I'll tell him. All right, friends, that is it for us. Hope you enjoy the conversation. Look for Jessica's information and the summary of this episode. In the meantime, be nice people, make good choices, and be present.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or mariamenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.